Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. So today we're not going to talk about cats or monsoon. Today we're actually going to talk about Lechuza Pon. So a few friends of mine always requested for me to do this video because I've been trying Lechuza Pon for a while now. By the way, before we begin, and if you're new to the channel, my name is Cyril. I run a plant Instagram page called Cyril Cybernated, where I post like planty ideas, plant care and styling. So if you want to do, or if you do enjoy daily content like that, go over to Instagram and give me a follow. And since you're already watching the video, might as well subscribe to the channel. So today we're actually going to talk about Lechuza Pon. It's one of the trendy substrates or mixtures. So if you're new to the planting game, of course you might know about soil, probably heard about leca or the hydroponic balls. Well, water propagation is probably something that you're familiar with, or the other mixtures like perlite, pumice, cocoa chips, horticultural charcoal. Those are commonly mentioned, or you might occasionally come across them every now and then. Let me just put monsoon down. Okay. So today we're gonna talk about Lechuza Pon. I don't have a bag here, but I do have this planter that I have in here, and I'll show you what pon looks like. So this is just a rambling video. So this is Lechuza Pon. I'm gonna link their website. I've been trying or using their substrate for a while now. I think for about a year in April. A few of my friends have been using Lechuza for a while, and it took me years to get convinced because number one, Lechuza is not cheap. Let me just open the door for monsoon. I'm back. Number one, Lechuza is not cheap. A small 6-liter bag, I believe, is already $15, whereas, you know, I was being cheap. That's why it took me years to get convinced to try it. However, during the mids of COVID and everything, I was just, you know, open to new ideas. I couldn't just go to my normal garden center at that time. So I thought that I might as well just try this new substrate out. So if you notice, it's basically a collection of different kinds of volcanic or pebbles or rocks, lava rocks. And they do disclose most of the breakdown. I think there's pumice here, there's lava rocks, and the bluish greenish ones are zeolites. So basically they have this self-watering planter industry going on. Lechuza Pon is also very popular or famous in the Europe region, and they're always out of stock here in the US. So basically, let's try to arrange what I want to talk about. First, I guess I've covered what Lechuza Pon is. It's like an inorganic alternative substrate or mixture that you could use with your plants. Actually, most of my plants in this shelf situation that I have are in pon, if not moss. Only a selected few are still in soil. I am in the process of converting everything though to pon if time and resources permit, because basically I discovered that although it's a bit expensive, but it is time efficient, and it kind of takes care of its own it's already in pon. So we've covered what pon is. I'll probably post their link on the description, or probably put their website role somewhere here on the screen. So this is pon, and they usually advertise free to buy their self-watering pots. This is not one of their pots. This is one of some self-watering pots that come in a set that I got from Amazon. I wanted to get something like this for my trailing philodendron, I mean not trailing, but climbing philodendrons, but this was too short or narrow, so it wasn't a perfect fit. So I also want to talk about what type of plants I have in Lechuza Pon. So let's now talk about what plants I have in pon. Basically, I think I've tried converting most, if not all, the genus that I carry here at home. I have, unbelievably, some Huperzias or epiphytes in Lechuza Pon. This one I've had for a while now, and it's just grown so much. So since we have this up, I would want to talk to you about probably like 2 or 3 different setups where or how you could use pon. First, conventionally, what they encourage on their website is a self-watering planter. And this one is not from them. I actually don't buy their planters, but a cheaper alternative would be these planters I always find from Amazon. So the clear ones through the months that I've been using Pon work best for me. If you're not someone who likes to see the gulky, mossy situation that might build up anyway, you could just clean this up easily. This thing just pops off and you could replace the water and give it a good scrub. This one I just haven't been lenient on changing the water because I also put some fertilizer in the solution and I would think that it's just doing okay over there. So one that I always use for most of my plants is this self-watering setup, which it has a wick or a wicking system. I feel that it is most effective for Hoyas. The Hoyas seem to love this setup because Hoyas are like treated, well, like succulents. They like to dry in between. But if you have Pon on this setup with a wicking system, moisture just gets up on the through the wick and keeps the actual substrate dry. And I think that works best for Hoyas. This one just grew crazy over the past year because I converted in Pon, well, since October, I believe. So Hoyas, this is a Hoya rotundiflora, and I did manage to have it bloom finally when only when I switched in Pon. When this was in soil or in my Hoya mix, it just kept on blasting blooms. So I feel like Pon helps with keeping the moisture and humidity consistent, something that I can't do even though I tend to overwater. So that's why a lot of my Hoyas, if not all of my smaller Hoyas that could fit in a small self-watering planter, are in Pon now. Let me take this down. Actually, let me just put it back in the shelf. And then another setup that people tend to do is planting and actually propagating their Hoyas or their plants directly in ponds. So this one works similar to how you would usually use leca or the hydroton balls. I've tried, so this Hoya decay cutting is the tip cutting of an existing plant and just wanted to try to sun stress it. It's not that clear, but it's a bit sun stressed on this end. I tried to propagate it in water first and then stick it in pond. I've tried it several times as well, whereas I just cut the cutting and stick it in pond and do it this way. I recently thought of doing these dessert thingies I could get through the dollar store. They're very inexpensive and it allows me to see the root development inside the container. So what I just tried to do is maintain a water level, probably like 1/3, 1/4 of the actual container because the pond will soak it up, I guess, and just allow the water or the plant to have the needed moisture from the actual substrate. So it could work like that. Um, I've also tried to just like directly plant the cuttings in pon without even trying to root them first, like my Hoya linearis over there. It just took off and rooted. So it is also a good propagating medium. But these days during winter, I find better success if I root the cuttings or the plants in water first, whereas a little bit of the soil or a little bit of the roots get established first before I try transferring to pon. I do have a heat mat somewhere over there, which helps with the rooting setup these days when it's colder, but I've tried propagating without heat mats and it was just successful. I also have my plants, my Antheriums. Most of my Antheriums are in pon, and my Alocasias. This is an Alocasia clipeolata, and the other tiny starting plant is an Alocasia odora variegata. So first of all, I didn't think Alocasias would do well in Lechuza Pond, but they're so far loving it. If you can see, it's not so clear. There are smaller roots emerging from the actual substrate, and the alocasia roots are just going crazy actually at the bottom. Again, pardon the dirty, watery thingy, but there's actually some systemic granules that I tried putting in my alocasias recently because I thought that the inorganic medium would make them less susceptible to pests, but I've dealt with some thrip situation recently, and that has just recently been controlled. And I think that putting the systemic granules on the Lechuza Pon will help. It's still an ongoing experiment. Another thing is that my friend Kay also told me that her anthuriums have been doing or living their best life. This one had thrips, I believe. That's why it looks like this. But it's finally putting out a new leaf. My Antherium suffered a lot because of that recent infestation, but honestly, the root system is just super healthy. This one doesn't poke out, but I do have one Warockianum that pokes out, and I feel like Antheriums love it. In Lechuza Pon. I do have this Antherium crystallinum over here, although it's not in a fancy self-watering setup. What I did was have nursery pots. I put it on top of this planter, IKEA planter. I sealed the drainage hole shut so that I could just put a wick underneath. And so far my crystallinum is loving that. I might as well show you the other type of self-watering planters that I use with my Lechuza Pon. I know this video is kind of getting all over the place, but I just want to do like a quick run through on how I have things. So this is another type of self-watering pot that you could get from Amazon. This one was like sent by a friend, some extras they had. This Warrock is also putting out a new leaf. Recently lost all the older leaves because of winter and I think the thrips infestation. And this is why I'm telling you that I prefer the clear self-watering pots because they're really convenient. If I just go through my shelf and just look at the water levels, eye level, I would see everything and I would know which plant needs watering. Whereas if I still have them, although this one looks aesthetic because it just looks like a normal ceramic planter, it's kind of like not friendly to a lazy plant person like me. So I'm just gonna show you how they're doing so well in Lechuza Pond. So I don't even need the wicking system anymore because this plant just decided to put the roots down and soak up all the water on the reservoir. By the way, I did do an Instagram poll on my stories yesterday, and I will be answering some questions. Someone brought up a question about the reservoir. So if you're thinking which one is better, it depends on your preference, but the opaque, non-transparent self-watering planters are aesthetic and cleaner. You could even get them in other colors like this, or this is another variation, whereas they're not clear, but they do have a, it's so hard to, they do have this small water meter that allows you to see how much water is there. This one's cute. It will match my normal terracotta aesthetic, but just recently, I just would want to buy all the clear plastic containers because that's really more convenient for me. So this is a Hoya linearis living its best life in Lechuza Pon. This is one of the first few plants that I converted into pon. My Filipino plant friends would joke that we are pon stars now because we love pon now. So yeah, just loving the best life. I've never seen this cutting of my Linares that I managed to save since 2018 healthier. So I would really recommend pon, especially if you love Hoyas or these types of Hoyas that thrive in high humidity or just love to stay moist and never dry out in between. Here are some more plants that I have in pon. So if you're wondering, will philodendrons do well in pon? Yes, they would. This one is a philodendron sodiroy that I just recently converted in pon, but it's loving it. It used to be in a small terrarium. That's why the aerial roots are just starting to dry up. And this one is an Antherium crystallinum that battled thrips in the past 2 months as well. So far it's alive, and I think it's putting out a new growth somewhere here. Bigger philodendrons of mine, like the gloriosum. I do have a philodendron mame over here. My philodendron pastizanum is also in pon, and they're loving it. What else do I have in pon? I also have a very Monstera Thai constellation somewhere here, and even my pink princess is in pon, but it's not in a conventional self-watering planter setup. It looks horrible, but I've neglected my pink princess for a long time. Like for the past 2 years, it doesn't really spark joy anymore, but I'm keeping it alive because of the sentimental value that it's one of the first few philodendrons that I got because of the craze back in 2018. But yeah, this one is a Target self-watering planter. It does have a wicking system and it looks gross, but it's one of another variety of self-watering planters that you could get. This one is implanted in Lechuza Pon, and I'm hopeful that the consistent moisture that this pond setup will just make this plant grow better because it's been neglected for a while now. So here at the back is my Monstera Thai constellation. I'm not even gonna bother to get it from here because it's just settled. I have a Philodendron paracifolium, a Philodendron mexicanum, and a self-watering setup, and they are doing fine. I also have this big ass Hoya polynura, not in a self-watering setup, but if I'm actually starting to root this small cutting that I cut from it a few months ago, and I just want to see how much it would grow if it's now in pond setup. So I've rooted it in water for a few months, and normally the polynura is one of the Hoyas that love to stay moist, and I think Lechuza Pon is one of the better mediums that you could put it in. It's not the best looking cutting. Um, what else? I've also tried rooting an obovata directly in pond. At first, I was just like, this is a non-transparent container. It's actually a ceramic planter with a plug at the bottom. So what I did was just fill out some pond in it, stuck my cuttings, and what I would do is spray it every few days while estimating that there's going to be this much of a water level at the bottom. And right now the plant is rooted and it's even putting out a new leaf. And now let me just go. Oh, another thing that I want to show you is when it comes to propagation, this is kind of weird because I have this terrarium. So my friend Patricia Buzo Books, or the creator under DB Terrariums, sent me some cuttings a while back. So I've always had this. I think this is called a star moss. When I tried to make a terrarium and it was a big fail, I just left it in this container, and then I started filling it out with pon, you know, the ones that would drop on the floor after I repot some things. And I just stuck these cuttings, and they're kind of like in a self-watering or a passive semi-hydro setup now, and this begonia is just living its best life. So I think it just the mixture, the substrate just provides it with the necessary aeration, even though it's in a terrarium setup. I have this plastic thing to cover it, and it's living its best life. If you can see, there's a peperomia over here, and I'm even rooting some African violet leaf cuttings in here. I think that, you know, the pond situation definitely helped out. And before we head out to the next part, I do have several questions that I'd like to answer based on the questions that I've had on Instagram. Okay, the last part of this video will be answering some questions. Number one, Lechuza Pon is always sold out. Sold out, yes. They only restocked twice in the past year that I've been trying them, so it's hard to get some for yourself. That's why when there was a last restock, I really encouraged my friends to get even just the smallest bag, just so they could try it out and see if it works for them. Now, what will be an alternative? Now, I know a few people who tried to make their own pond mix. So since they disclosed the ingredients on the outside of their containers, a few friends tried it with lava rock, zeolite. So all these ingredients you could buy off from Amazon or wherever you can probably get them locally, if you know that's better. And so far, their success rate is almost the same as Lechuza Pon. However, getting an alternative mixture doesn't, or doing your own alternative mixture doesn't always come up this inexpensive. It's about the same when you buy a bag from Pon. So, I guess if you don't really have the um, ability or means to get yourself some Lechuza Pon mixture, you could do a DIY mix by yourself. However, it's just gonna come up the same, if not more expensive even. Next is when to water. So if you do have them in self-watering setups like I have, I just try to maintain the water level for, like, you know, at least an inch at the bottom. This one is gonna be thirsty, but depends on which plants you have. Sometimes I do let them dry in between. You know, like alocasias can tolerate to dry in between waterings. So there's no ultimate guide when to water, but if you do have them directly planted in pond with no drainage, definitely you have to maintain at least 1/3 or 1/4 of the actual pond measuring, just to make sure that there is some water left at the bottom. Someone also brought up if which is better, if there's going to be a reservoir or not. Basically, for Hoyas, I have tried a lot of Hoyas in the pond setup. They do like the self-watering wicking setup situation, but I also know a lot of people who do it and just directly plant it in Hoya-like soil and treat it like how they would normally do leca or hydroton balls, where with like 1/3 of the water level. So in general, I think a reservoir is still more efficient, and it's easier to maintain a huge plant collection in that. Next, how to root. Sometimes I just, like what I've mentioned earlier, I just directly plant them in pond. During spring, summer, and up until fall, that worked well for me. However, during winter, I find it more efficient. I'm in zone 10, A or B, I forgot. I'm in California. So we don't really have harsh winters over here. But I find it more effective if I root the cuttings in water first, start it off with a little bit of baby roots, then plant them in pond. I can do direct pond watering like this one, and it still takes off and just lives its best pond life. Next is someone said that they recently planted their alocasia in pond, and I do have some alocasias in pond, so I'm confident that it'll do better. Now, I forgot to talk about converting in pond. Now, it is very important for you to blast the roots with whatever existing moist substrate or mixture you have it in, because for Hoyas, they just most of the time they do well, but sometimes the problem arises 4, 5, 6 months after you've converted a plant, whereas the extra soil or the extra cocoa chips, the extra moss that are in the roots would cause the problem. My first Hoya conversion, which is my Hoya Eskimo, it went into a big fail because my Hoya Eskimo, I got that from a cutting that I imported from Thailand, and it was doing okay even with sphagnum moss on the base of the roots. But when I converted it in pond, I would always think like, oh, I shouldn't really disturb the root system of my Hoyas. But that's not apparently the case most of the time, because apparently they can be okay after a while, but they will just like go downhill when all that sphagnum moss is getting too much moisture. It will make your Hoyas get overwatered or something. And someone asked, like, pun on its mixture itself already has some slowly release fertilizer in it. What fertilizer do I use afterwards? So yes, going back, what fertilizer do I use? So the pond mixture already has some slow release fertilizers in them. These yellow balls, I believe. Um, this one is at Hoya erythrina that I planted in pond. Technically, I always just use a hydroponic grade fertilizer. I like my fertilizer when they're in liquid form so that I could dilute them well. I still do like a less concentrated mixture even during winter because I put them in the reservoir anyways, and it doesn't really touch the plant literally. I guess it would, but it just gets so wicked up, I guess. So I haven't tried a lot of what do you say this, like brands, but what I always use is the one that I have already have, the Green Farm liquid fertilizer, and I feel like it just works well with the plants. And I think that's practically it. These are, again, if you do have some questions about pond, sometimes I would have them in my captions on Instagram. But I feel like for the past 9 months, it's been the biggest, most efficient change that I could do, especially someone who loves to overwater. I tried amending my soil, but just for my Hoyas, I would not even think about them anymore because I do have them in pond. Advantages, um, self-watering setup is very easy. All you need to do is make sure that there's at least some water left in your reservoir. Another advantage is that once you don't really spend a lot of time watering the plants, you would have time for, doing pest prevention. And recently, I feel like adding systemic granules on the actual mix or on the reservoir would even help control potential pest infestation. So I think that's a plus. Another advantage is the plants just love it, and I've tried it on different genus of plants: monsteras, philodendrons, antheriums, hupersias, hoyas. What else? Practically everything that I have. Um, Compared Leca to Pond, Leca is cheaper, but I think that Pond is just like up by another level or two when it comes to like doing plant care. Because with Leca, I do have some of my Hoyas in Leca. Like this one, this Hoya australis is in Leca. The thing is with Leca, it's also inorganic, so less chances of getting pests and stuff. I just also dilute. Oh, this one's very dry. I didn't even notice. See, I hate opaque containers. Um, but the thing is, I just feel like pond is a better way. But if you want a cheaper alternative, I think you could go with Leca, because Leca is also fine. Like this Australis is putting out new growth, even though I forgot to water it. There's no water on the reservoir completely. Um, disadvantage pun is it can be expensive, but I feel like whatever you spend on the actual substrate and in the planters too, because you have to do them in a self-watering planter, so that's another thing that made me hesitate through these years to convert into pond. Like, I got rid of all my terracotta planters or the decorative planters. I could reuse them because some of them don't have drainage, and I could do like a wicking system with a nursery pot inside. But it will get expensive. But if you're saving time, I feel like it's worth spending the extra buck on that. And especially like I never really had to worry about my Hoyas or most of my Antheriums anymore because they're in a self-watering pond setup. Like the chances of me overwatering them and them rotting lessened when I changed them in pond, and it just made plant care way easier for me. Even if I'm managing like over 200 plants indoors and about 100 outdoors that I let nature take care of anyways. Another disadvantage is the availability. It's not readily available all year round, so you might want to be creative and resourceful in like making your own mix. As I've mentioned earlier, people have had success, and when they get the chance, just buy pun. I don't. This video is not an endorsement, but I'm just gonna put out all the information out there because I feel like I would have watched something like. So I was saying like this video is not endorsed or sponsored or a collaboration with Lechuza Pon, but I feel like I put out this content because this is something that I would have watched or wanted to hear when I was starting doing pon. So again, it can be expensive, but it just try a small bag if you could find some, and then see how it works for you. But definitely, I'm glad that that friend of mine convinced me after 3 years of me just trying to put that Lechuza Pon option away because I was just too cheap to buy a more expensive substrate. It's worth it. Get the bigger bag if you can because it's gonna be more cost efficient. And it will definitely save you a lot of time, and it will definitely make plant care easier for you. At the beginning, gathering all the resources would be tiring. If you, I did have to order a lot of these self-watering pots that fortunately came in sets on Amazon. I will try to link them below if you're interested. I do have an Amazon shop as well that I try to put everything that I buy from Amazon in there. Basically, your choice. And then what else? So yeah, if you have more questions, feel free to post them below in the comment section. I would be glad to answer them. Subscribe to the channel. I'm really trying to put out more unique content out there, helpful and both aesthetic and design style wise as well and creative. And yeah, just give it a like, comment down below if you have questions, suggestions, and subscribe. And if you don't follow me on Instagram yet, follow me. Again, it's Cyril Cybernated, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.